I walk in and not, I would say, a minute into the conversation, he was just like, "What the fuck is this? What the fuck were you thinking? What the fuck?" And he just cursed me out and then dismissed me from his office. If I went back and I was clinical, purely clinical about it, he wouldn't have gotten it. So I had to go back to him and say the next day, "You know what? You said these words. You said fuck 9 times. You said it in front of people. It hurt my feelings." I told him, I went home and I cried.
Yeah. Oh my God.
But then I also position it in terms of the business. Because you hurt my feelings and I cried, first of all, that's against our core values. Second of all, I don't think we consider that professional. But third of all, I have to lead your team. They're not going to trust me. I don't look like a leader and I feel less confident. So we may not win more business. But it's really important to, if it feels emotional to you, outline the emotional impact and the business impact. Don't skip that part.
Welcome back. We are on today with my guest Jay Guilford on the 12th edition. That's right. Oh my God, I almost forgot what was it called. Welcome back. We are on today with my guest Jay Guilford on the 12th edition podcast. I'm your host, Angie Sorensen. Listen, if you enjoyed this episode, just as per usual, don't forget to share with a friend, give it a 5-star rating, a review. You can follow it or rate it on Spotify and also on Apple Podcasts. You can do that on Radio FM, Amazon Music, YouTube, wherever you're listening to it right now. It makes such a big difference. This is why this podcast has grown just little by little over time, and it is really thanks to you for sharing it, liking it, and just supporting me all around. So thank you so much. So under today's episode with Jay, we talk about how to solve conflict within the professional setting. So whether you are the boss or the employee, the team member, Jay's experience is really rich and great because it spans from working at Cirque du Soleil, which he refers to as Cirque several times in the episode. When he says Cirque, he means it is Cirque du Soleil. So he's worked from Cirque du Soleil to all the big, like to some major big names in corporate America. So he has helped leaders and team members undo terrible behavior and, resolve toxic environments. Because we know, like, it can actually make you feel really sick physically when you are at work and you're not enjoying it, or you're not enjoying a certain person, and you just don't know how to communicate. It really does affect your health. So it is such an important skill to have, to be able to resolve those conflicts. And I certainly am not, I definitely need help in that area too. So I got him over, for very selfish reasons, but also, I know those episodes are also useful for many. So there you go. So that's why I got him on. And he really, what I like about Jay is that he doesn't just empower, his clients to speak up, but also to know the difference between speaking up and knowing when it's also and knowing the difference between, I'm gonna get there. Knowing when is basically knowing the difference between speaking up and knowing when things are not also responsibility. So this episode applies for communication, whether it's at work and also actually in our private lives. Okay, because those, like they say, like wherever you are, like they say, wherever you go, there you are. Okay, see, I'm bothering. These are not my expressions. That's like, it's a famous expression. So, yeah. So I butchered it a little bit, but we're there. And so, yeah, Jay gives us plenty to think about. I love his candor. I love his sense of humor. He's got great energy. He's been sharing, what he's done for us today is that he shared great stories, but also how-to formulas. And so, yeah, I just think he's brilliant. And so, on a side note, I need to give like a little disclaimer. The bad experience that I mentioned of being fired after speaking up about boundaries being crossed, that job is not listed on my LinkedIn, is not listed on my CV, so their privacy is respected. It was honestly like a flash in the pan experience, very brief, no need to put it on the CV. So what I say about that person, no one knows apart from obviously very close circle, but they already know that. So there you go. So please, without further ado, please help me give a big warm welcome to Jay. Let's begin. Well, welcome, Jay. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks for inviting me, Angie.
No, it's good. I'm really excited to, to have you on because I saw your profile online and I also listened to your interview when you were on the Ginny Clark podcast, and I just really
Yeah.
loved your candor on there, and I thought you came with some really amazing insights, and so I thought, let me get you on because this is something that I've personally find difficult, and I want to talk to you about how to solve conflicts in a
Yeah.
professional settings, whether you are the boss or whether you are working for someone else. I think both parties, can find it difficult to handle conflicts. Though sometimes they don't know there's a conflict, and
Yes.
so,
Yeah. A lot of
right.
times, actually. Yeah.
It's like I was just like I didn't know I was upsetting you, and so I was just walking around feeling good.
Uh-huh.
So before
Yes.
we dive in, Jay, please introduce yourself, where you live, and what you do.
Well, Angie, I guess you're not telling people the whole story because you probably were attracted by the photo of me with the clown. Because that's
Well,
my.
there is that. There is that.
Just
Plus,
that's
you're very
clever.
handsome too. So, don't want to make you feel
Yeah.
uncomfortable. But for those who are
I'll.
listening, Jay's very
I will.
handsome.
I will take all of that. And
Yeah.
folks, if you go to my profile picture, maybe Angie will post it. There's a picture of me with a clown. I worked with a bunch of clowns long ago on a land far, far away. I worked with Cirque du Soleil,
Uh,
and I created Cirque du Soleil's corporate training program. And yeah, it does. It was as fun as it sounded because I actually strapped executives from Fortune 100 companies into our equipment, and I flew them across Cirque theaters and training studios. And we did that. And it sounds like fun and games, but it really was to teach them collaboration, communication, and trust in a real way. So, in addition to it being a lot of fun and game, there was a lot of learning involved and a lot of core values and corporate stuff. So it wasn't just playing around. But Angie, that's probably why my picture seemed so attractive, quote unquote.
well,
And that
well, Cirque du Soleil has definitely got some cachet. Like when I read that, I was like, oh my, yeah, because that's a
it's
big
a
deal.
thing. It's a thing. It's a
But you
thing.
also
They have.
did like the footsie. You also did the footsie companies and all of that. You've got like a really big mix of experience.
Yeah,
Mm.
I've worked with like Microsoft, Mastercard, Google, Lifetime Fitness, Uber, Kmart Australia. Kmart Australia, you may know this. It was a we worked with them. It was a $6 billion retail mega house. I did not know that. So I don't want to name drop and say that I went in and changed those companies. I worked with teams inside of the
Mm.
companies. I wasn't like going in at the helm of the entire company. Of course not, but I have had the benefit of working with high performing teams, both employees and bosses. So I see what those employees and bosses do well with conflict. And I'm
Mm.
very able to share that with you today.
Yeah, no, I love that because I think, I mean, I do, I have gone in and out of day jobs whilst doing this. And, I have been and probably still will be like, someone's employee. Ugh. But, and, but also, I also, have to myself, sometimes I'm the one who's in charge, when I run workshops or,
Mhm.
in the past I've had freelancers and stuff like that. And I do find that, I don't know if it's age, but I find like as I get older, I find like, you know, we as a person, I get more and more timid to go ahead and know how to resolve it. When I was younger, when I was more, I guess, like naive, like in my 20s, I would have no issues like putting like the CEO, in for a meeting, calling him for a meeting to resolve the conflict, like because he's like he was impacting my work, and I was trying to help him, and I needed him to help me
Yes.
help him, and that was, I never got into trouble back then for that. I even got promoted, but now I feel, I don't know, like things have changed, and so I think, yeah, so I think it'd be great to just discuss those things, and but first, I'm really curious, Jay, like to hear like what got you into this line of work.
Well, you know what? It's exactly what you said. It's a lot of. I have worked with maybe tens of thousands of employees now across a wide variety of industries and companies. And what I've seen is that people are having challenges dealing with interpersonal conflict at work. And what's interesting about that is that I often partner with HR teams. And a lot of people have the misconception that HR is there to handle interpersonal issues, and they're not. So what happens with me when I partner with the HR teams, or sometimes it's C-level VPs or HR VP or C-level folks. And what happens is that the employees, when I get deeper into the work, they might say, well, HR isn't helping me solve the problem. And I have to come in as an outsider and point out that HR is there for legal issues, payroll or harassment, which they should help you solve in the US. That's illegal. But in terms of interpersonal conflict, if they spent their time doing that, then they wouldn't be able to do the programming or any of the other stuff that that needed to be done. So I do see that there is not a lot of resources for people to solve interpersonal conflict at work. And I had many interpersonal conflicts at work, and I've seen the pattern just going in and out of organizations to say, oh, this is an issue. And I want to say this to you, Angie, this is an issue that's going to impact the profit of the organization.
Oh, that's the thing, yeah, because if you have to use like the old expression, one bad apple, will, I can't remember what the expression is now, but you just say one rotten apple and it just destroyed a basket of apples. But it's,
yes, that's better. That's better. I like that.
And I think because I have worked before in corporate where we started as a team of 8 and no one could handle the manager, because the manager was under so much pressure and stress. She was not a people manager. She was great at managing the business, and there's two very different skills. And I think recruitment is expensive, and it takes time as well to find people. It's energy. So yeah, if they did eventually actually, because at the end it was just her and I did eventually got someone to come in and help her. But by that time, so much damage had happened. Yes. I had tried, she had tried, it was just so difficult. And I think it is what you said, it is costly, it costs profit, because 2 people doing 8 people's workload it's a lot.
If you think of it more even if, let's say you're a leader and you just are interested in the bottom line and you don't care about people stuff, you should care about core values and morale, because they're increasingly becoming more important. They're becoming rubrics for judgment for investors. So investors are looking at that stuff. But let's say you don't care about that. Okay, fine, whatever. The people are the cogs in the machine. And if they don't work together well, the machine will not run. That's just it. So what's interesting, I've seen this in so many organizations. I remember being brought into an organization, and part of what was happening was 2 VPs who controlled huge accounts, hundreds of millions of dollars. They had a 2-year Cold War, and no one from on the inside could solve it, because everyone inside was politically invested in one side or the other. And it was costing them clients. It was nibbling off, this client's not renewing here, this client is not renewing there, because they couldn't come to agreement. They were losing talent because their top talent saw them warring. And they said, well, I'll just go over to the competitor where there's not all this politics. Yeah. So it has a real direct impact on the bottom line. And Angie, that's my work. It's when people talk about soft skills, they're like, oh, it's nice to have, it's not really important. But if you look at one recent example is Luck and Coffee, their stock tanked because some executives decided to lie about the finances. Honesty is not a technical skill. It's a soft skill. It's a soft skill. But if you don't teach it and people behave in inappropriate ways, then there you go, your business tank. Their stock is still not recuperated. I think it lost 74% of its valuation. And it went from I think it was $35 to $6 a share. And at one point it was down to $2 or $1. It was just ridiculous. So yeah. I always want to draw that connection. So if there are any leaders listening and you're thinking, oh man, that leadership skills stuff is not important, when those leaders aren't trained and they're reacting in these ways to employees, those employees are going to leave, or those leaders are going to make poor choices. And it's going to be in the news. It's going to be in the news.
Oh, yeah, 100%. We only one tweet away nowadays, It's just, you have to be careful. Okay, so I'm just stepping out of the episode for a minute. If you like what I'm doing and you want to have your own podcast too, I actually teach the stuff. And I absolutely love doing it because podcasting has been such an incredible experience for me. My favorite parts have been being able to just be myself, connecting with fascinating guests from all walks of life, connecting with you as well, engaging with you. It has been really an amazing experience. And so I am beyond excited to be able to help you create your own mark in the world through podcasting by showing you how to do it. So to get the details on how to sign up, just go to learnpodcasting.online. I will add the link in the show notes and I really hope to see you there. So now back onto the episode. But I think it's just that I think it's important to do, to have personal accountability, because that's kind of like what I heard when you mentioned about it is not HR's role. HR's role, they have a lot of things to do and is not necessarily to come in and deal with personal conduct unless it escalates, and that's usually and it's become an issue and it's almost too late already. But I think it's to do just based on a human level, like we have to be accountable. So I'm accountable. I have to speak up if my boss is crossing lines, but I need to know how to speak up and how to say it without losing my job. And then my boss has to have accountability to be able to express what his expectations are, what he's not happy with, what he's happy with, how to motivate a team. And it's all those, it's in those soft skills, because I think it's not just work, right? That translates as well in personal relationship, whether it's family, friends, lovers, husbands, wives, you name it. It's communication, which I feel like, because with what you do and your expertise with conflict resolution, communication is such a buzzword, but knowing how to do it, that's where that's what you do is so valuable, and probably why people get you in to come in and resolve. Because I really want to ask you literally how to's, if there's some frame of how we can do it. And so before we do that, I just wondered for us to have a bit of a picture, is there a typical conflict that we could sort of use to illustrate and use that as an example as how to communicate, how to manage up as an employee, and maybe how the employer could have handled it differently? So are there typical conflicts that you can think about that people come to you for at work? And
I can tell you, Angie, I can tell you so many, but one of the primary issues I see is that leaders are not getting feedback about how they're performing. And I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I am. And it's because people automatically have the assumption that they're going to lose their jobs. Mm-hmm, they assume that the leader, when you tell the leader something that she or they or he does not like, that leader will react by initiating their power to get you fired. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So the first thing I want to say to everyone listening, and I'm speaking from a US context, it's pretty similar in the UK. I'm going to tell you, it is hugely difficult in this day and age for a leader of an organization to not like you and immediately get you fired. There's such a matrix of decision making, and there's so many people involved. And in the US, it's very litigious. So it's actually statistically, mostly what will happen if they do retaliate is that you might be moved to a different position, or they might take away work from you. But it's very difficult.
I think it depends. I mean, here in the UK, if you haven't been somewhere for a year, they don't need a reason. I mean, it happened to me in December, where actually I spoke up because the person crossed many lines, and next conversation, I was out.
So what was what? Tell me, say more about that, because we can do the case study.
Well, I guess I guess I'm not sure. I mean, this thing is I'm not sure how much I should say and stuff like that.
Well, let's leave it alone then.
but I guess but I could say in broad stroke is that I think it was more like a typical case of, it's more like a personality. I think that person was so used to not hearing, to always getting their way. They literally thought they were above everyone, and that was in every interaction. And I think my go-to usually when that person was quite emotional. It's a very high player in his industry,
Mm-hmm.
and so but quite an emotional, like really emotional. I mean, everyone was saying it as well. I was like, oh my gosh, it's emotional.
Mm-hmm.
But my go-to when someone is like that is like the more they sort of lose it, the more calmer I get. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that person read that as I didn't care, because their previous assistant was, like
Mm-hmm.
very good for him in the sense that she'd be like, oh my God, she was enabling him, she was cuddling him. She knew how to play the game. Whereas I don't, I'm very much like, let him play. But then, I did actually express, because he lost it over something that was really like unreasonable. And I was sick as well. And I said, look, this, I don't know what to say to you, because this is like you're crossing some lines here. This is what happened, this is what I did, and I'm sorry about this. But I tried to explain it, and then and the next conversation was, this isn't working. Whereas for weeks on end he was like how amazing I was, but I knew he was a bit funny.
Well, there is a situation in which, and I want to say again, I think that this is true, that you can have privatized industries or companies where there are these dictatorial leaders who have a lot of power, and they have HR under their thumb, and then they do get to press buttons.
Yeah, there
That
was
is
no
that.
HR. It was just like a four-man band. I
Yeah,
was number
and and
four. Yeah.
and that's the other part. Like organizations that are probably, I think the capacity is less than 150 people, then they don't usually have an HR capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have that, that's the legal recourse.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about in matrixed organizations where there's like HR and all these other folks, the leader just can't make that decision because it has to go through HR, and HR is legally bound. And if they don't do what's right, then they lose their license. So like even people, so I don't disagree that that can be the case. When you have a matrixed organization with orgs and like VPs and directors and
Yes.
coordinators, there's so many people involved in the decision and so many people's jobs at stake if they decide inappropriately, that they just don't do it. Not even because they care about you, just because as an HR manager, if I do this wrong, then I will lose my license and I can't
Yeah.
work
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I do agree. I want to say two things to listeners. One, there are a lot of bad bosses out there and they do horrible things. And there are situations where a boss can get you fired. If you're in an organization that has more than 100, 150 people, that is usually not the case. I have worked with namesakes of brands. I've worked with people who, I can't say who, but like their name is on the building or their name is on the box that you're eating from. They don't even have that power in this day and age. Like if you think about what's happening with Victoria's Secret and Nike and the football teams, that these executives who control $1 billion accounts are being let go because it's just not worth it. So yes, Angie, I do know that that happens, but I also want to empower people to say that from my perspective, having been bullied, having worked people through bullying, having worked with leaders who control $1 billion portfolios who were assertive, I don't want to say they were bullies.
Mm-hmm.
I know that not mostly, many times the leaders aren't getting the feedback to even know it's happening.
Yeah, I think I think the thing is, you're absolutely correct. I think that, I mean, I did have a lot of empathy for him, as much as I didn't like how he went about it.
Mhm.
And also personally, I was happy it happened, so soon, rather than give a year of my life to someone who may just suddenly, you
Yes.
know what I mean, like just flip
Uh,
like that. But so it was bittersweet. However, I also did have empathy for the pressure he was under, but also for the fact that I'm pretty sure no one's ever said it to him the way it was, like it is. He thought he think he's empowered women. He thinks that he's doing, in his mind he's doing all the right thing, and I called him out on it. There's certain things I can't say here, but it's like, so I think when with people around you, if they are not telling you, if they're not reflecting, and they just bow to you because you are powerful in their eyes, you are going to end up being like this. That's what happens with spoiled kids, right? We bring up little tyrants, and then we wonder why they're impossible adults, and it's like, well,
yeah.
maybe they needed a bit of a
I can tell you a story. I remember, and this is I can't say who, but there is a guy who owned a large international entertainment company. And he had a person who was assigned as his assistant. And everyone said, well, we're going to call him Kareem. Kareem only drinks this type of water. Kareem only drinks this type of water. And this personal assistant, they were at some function and he said, can I have some water? And she spent 30 or 40 minutes looking for this specific bottle of water. And she was like, I'm so sorry, Kareem, I couldn't find it. And he was like, no, just get me some from the tap. Long ago in a land far, far away, he had once said he liked this type of water, and he's very assertive. So people there's this myth of power. So one thing we need to deconstruct for your listeners is that ask yourself if your leader has shown behaviors that say this person fires people when they give her or them feedback, or is that just a story that we've been told? Because I remember there's a study that it was 1,300 employees. They all responded. 80% of them said, my boss is doing something wrong. We all know it. We all talk about it, but none of us is telling the boss.
Yeah.
It is not, I want to be clear, this is not victim blaming. There's real power in organizations. It's dangerous to walk into your boss's office and say, I don't like that. They might retaliate. Don't do that, folks. That's not the thing to do. What I am saying, though, is that you have to ask yourself first, as a means of empowerment, have I ever said to my boss, when you said that, it hurt my feelings? And then what I coach folks through, I usually do it with teams because I'm brought in to help teams give leaders feedback. That just happened with a consumer packaged goods company. He was like, bring them in because they're not telling me, help them give me the feedback. Ask yourself, and this is a real pause, Angie, and you can ask yourself this, not with this boss, with others. Have I ever said, that really hurt my feelings? And do you think your boss is going to say, I don't care?
No, do you know what? This was, I think, the first time where when I've expressed something, because usually it's in the first 3 months, right? It's always, for me, it's always in the first 3 months, because you're getting to know someone, it's two worlds colliding, and it's in a professional setting. So you can't, you have to be, restrained. You can't just, you have to be in put your best foot forward all the time. And so that's fine. And because I've done it, because I've spoke up when the first time I was like, oh, that's crossing a boundary. I let them cross it because it's too late by the time I have to do the work. But then, and then the next available time when we can sit down, usually within a couple of days, and it's usually good because then everyone's sort of like, there's no emotions. And then I'll just discuss, I'll say, about that, and I just have that conversation. I say, like going forward, can we just discuss like what constitutes an emergency and like how do we go about it and, what our expectations are and that kind of stuff.
So I'm going to, Angie, and you brought me on here to say this. So I would say, yes, that's great. And what I suggest, and then I'm going to talk about what the leader should do, because it's not the employee's responsibility. Employees, I'm empowering you, but it's not your responsibility. And to be empowered, this happened to me. I walked into a leader's, a vice president's office, expecting to take over a leadership team. And he was handing over his leaders for me to lead for a client activation. They had paid money. I walk in and not, I would say, a minute into the conversation, he was just like, what the fuck is this? What the fuck were you thinking? What the fuck? And he just cursed me out and then dismissed me from his office. If I went back and I was purely clinical about it, he wouldn't have gotten it. So I had to go back to him and say the next day, you know what? You said these words. You said fuck 9 times. You said it in front of people. It hurt my feelings. I told him, I went home and I cried.
Yeah. Oh my God.
But then I also position it in terms of the business. Because you hurt my feelings and I cried, first of all, that's against our core values. Second of all, I don't think we consider that professional. But third of all, I have to lead your team. They're not going to trust me. I don't look like a leader and I feel less confident. So we may not win more business, but it's really important if it feels emotional to you, outline the emotional impact and the business impact. Don't skip that part.
Yeah.
Are you trying to hurt my feelings? No. Okay. So this is the best way to communicate with me, because when you do it that way, it hurts my feelings.
Yeah, I mean, it's highly antagonizing what he did to you. I
Yeah,
mean,
but
you
yeah,
know, I
you
mean,
think?
yeah, but he is lucky that you obviously you like well composed and your stuff, but someone else could have snapped back. Even in your line of work, I'm just saying,
Yeah, yeah,
we all have triggers, so you just never know what's going to flip who. And he's
yeah.
lucky that you have self-control, but you'd be totally in your right to say, well, not that it would solve anything, but to say fuck you and just
Yeah,
throw the water at him. I
yeah.
mean,
And I can tell,
insane.
and I'll tell you how dangerous it is to bring this story
Mm.
full circle. With this particular organization, a reporter, I have done many interviews. So a reporter from one of the top 5 business magazines in the world called me later and said, "Hey, we did some stuff with you earlier. What's going on with this organization? Do you have anything that we could write about?" And I had known that this had happened a number of times, and I could have easily. I mean, it's not that I'm not Oprah, and it wouldn't have destroyed the organization, but it would have been a story.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do that because I was trained, like I'm not going to do it. But any other person, so like you said, we're one tweet away. My article, I don't know if you read it. It's called "We're One Tweet Away from Disgrace." So
No,
if
I think I get this from you. Yeah, I think I got this from
yeah,
you. Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, we're one to
Or on your episode with Ginny. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're doing this stuff, you could damage yourself or the organization. So yeah, we're on the same page, Andy. We're on the same page. So
But I think,
what?
but
Yeah.
yes. So go on.
No, go continue.
Yeah, no, I think it's like so. Yeah, 'cause I think like to keep in mind, like I think that's what sometimes I have to keep reminding myself is like it's not just that you represent the company, which you do, when you work, whether you are the boss, or whether you are the employee, you're representing the company, but mainly you're representing yourself. And it's that thing of like, how do I want to be remembered? How do I want to come across? What if this? I'm not saying you have to be philosophical every time you have to resolve a conflict, but what if this was the last conversation I've had with someone, the last dynamic? How do you want to be? Like, what do you want? What do you want to leave behind? And I guess the thing is that it's very nice to think that in my mind, okay? But like in reality, so I know that you mentioned like, you talked us through like how you approach this person at work, the one who cursed you out. I'm gonna say nice. I'm not gonna say what I think about him. But right, so the person who cursed you out. But so let's say if you're at work, right? So and you are working for someone and someone who's is a bit intimidating, maybe the gravitas is somehow intimidating, something, a C-level boss in your company, and they've done something or said something that doesn't sit well with you at all. Like how, because I almost heard like there was like a formula, like almost like a with how you spoke to him, like what your previous
Yes, there
example
is.
is. That something you can help like someone? I'm not saying to give out all your secrets, because I know obviously this is the work that you do, but is there anything you can sort of advise us, like how, like once you've calmed down, like how do you resolve it with someone who seems a bit unattainable in terms of seniority in a company?
So yeah, and I think this is a great question, and I will give away all my secrets, Angie. I'll give away one of the 7 I have in my bag. And
Oh,
again,
do you
I
have a
want
pin code I can have as well?
this is gonna be
Now that we're at it, the 16-digit number, your mother's
no,
maiden name.
it's a
Let's go.
32-digit bit code. But because I want to also say to your listeners, this is not blaming employees for bosses who behave badly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So we want to say that Angie and I are not saying because your bosses behave badly, it is your responsibility to do all this work. What we're saying is that given that you're going to have at least 10 jobs in your lifetime, and you're going to work 96,000 hours in your lifetime, you're going to run across some bad bosses. So here are some tools. It is not your fault. You can respond in these ways that might help. So 2 different things. If you have an executive who's high powered in the organization, maybe there's a lot of politics and power and political plays and bullying that you don't want to get into. If so, then I would say don't approach them. If it feels emotionally too dangerous to you, find an influencer, not someone on YouTube who has 400,000 followers, or Instagram now, but find someone who can speak to the heart and head of that person and ask them to speak on your behalf. So you can ask someone who can influence that person to say, hey, C-level executive, I've noticed that you've been behaving this way to these team members, that really looks toxic. And I can see from their expressions that they may be afraid of you, or it's hurting their feelings, or it's reducing morale. I think you might want to consider changing that, because if you change your behavior, it's going to make them feel better and they're going to work better. But also, I've just read in the headlines, Nike, Victoria's Secret, National Football League, a lot of executives are being called to the mat. So in addition to it being good for them and the company, you can lose your job over this stuff. So you can find an executive someone else who could say that for you, because sometimes it feels too dangerous to say it yourself. The second thing, though, I think the power is in advocating for yourself. That's the master key.
Yeah.
Because if you have that key, then no matter where you go, you know how to speak up and out for yourself and set your professional standards. So that master key goes something like this. You're going to say explicitly what occurred. You're going to say how it impacts you, how it might impact your performance, so how it might impact the business. So all of those things. So I might say, like I said, you cursed me out. I'm not going to say that was uncomfortable yesterday. No, it wasn't uncomfortable for them, maybe. You cursed me out.
Yeah.
Yeah, you cursed me out. You said F me, F this, F me, F this, F that.
Yeah.
It was in front of these other team members. First of all, it hurt my feelings. I went home and I cried for an hour and a half. Yeah. I had to call friends over. I couldn't eat. My stomach was upset. You see how I'm drawing a real picture? These are things they don't know.
Yeah.
And because of that, it can impact my ability to do my job. And over the long term, it's going to impact the team and the company this way. Because realize they don't know that you went home crying. They don't know that it upset your stomach. And that's the level of vulnerability you want them to have. So you have it. If it feels safe, if politically it doesn't feel safe, then have someone else talk to them about it.
Yeah,
but
I mean, if he's a sociopath, he's definitely not going to care. But is obviously here, I think, here I'm also always assuming that it works if that person is not pathological, And I think there's a difference between a bad boss or bad person and a bad behavior. Yes. Right? This is like the bad behavior, because I mean, that is like that was very bad. I mean, obviously, I think you're right to say like he doesn't know that you went home crying, because if he thinks it's okay to behave that way, that he didn't have a moment of going, oh shit, I need to go and just quickly speak to Jay and say, listen, I was out of order, my bad. Like not even that, nothing. It's like he obviously gets away with murder, so
yeah. And then, I think you have to go ahead. No.
So exactly. So there was like the master key. So like one, like explain what happened explicitly, and then say how it made you feel. And I think there was a third.
And then say explain what happened, how it made you feel, how it will impact your performance, and then how it will impact the business in the long term.
Yes.
So all those things.
Yeah, because soft skills definitely, like you said earlier, people are not looking at those. They're not hiring soft skills, but soft skills is why people, I think, blossom in the workplace. Hence, the business makes more money. And so it's actually a business acumen, to have a good soft skill.
It's a must now, because the people are the only thing that separate one business from another. Like you can have high performing people at Uber, but you can't take them over to Nike. They can't produce, they can't design, so it's the people are the fabric of the organization. So like you can have people who are really great. At Cirque, it was this way. A really great acrobat is not a great dancer, or a really great dancer is not a great pyrotechnician, or a pyrotechnician is not great at lighting and sound. So those people and their talents are very unique and necessary. So you have to nurture them emotionally so that they can do well at work.
Yeah, absolutely. I said, and thank God that, you know, an acrobat is not also a good dancer. Although I'm sure there are some. I'm like, because it's like, you got to leave some for the rest of us. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, don't have it all. Like, you know, you can't be good at both spelling and dancing. I'm not having it. Like, it's like one or the other.
Side note, I have met some folks at Cirque who are like, I'm an acrobat, I'm a mathematician, I'm like,
Wow.
what's left? But that's
know.
rare. That's rare. Yeah.
It's like, wow, yeah. And so, you know, would there be any other, like, you know, from the employee point of view, would there be any, and what not to do, like when something, like, let's say just now, like that boss just said or did something that did not sit well with you, made you uncomfortable or whatever, other than, like, for me, like, I would say, like, not to react straight away. Like, if you're quite someone who's just, you know, have all the emotions first, like me, like, as well, like, I need to just, that's why I'm not going to show, and I'm going to calm down in my cave and come back, you know, later. But other than, like, so I would say, like, no reaction, because you're going to say things you're actually not really feeling or thinking anyway. Is there anything else you would advise, like, of what not to do in that moment?
Well, I would say one thing not to do, if you can not do this, is don't stick around for the moment. So if you can, this is a trick, and I have used this, and I have coached many other people to use it. If you're in a moment where there's a hostile situation or it's very uncomfortable, and you recognize that I don't like this, you can simply say, I got to go to the restroom. I need a bio break. No bully or toxic boss is gonna say, no, you can't go to the effing restroom. They're going to let you go. It's going to disarm the situation. Yeah. So don't stick around for it. If you can remember that, sometimes you're so emotionally paralyzed that you can't. So that's the first thing. You don't have to stick around for it, but doesn't mean you just stomp away and say, I'm not going to stand for this. You can say, I got to go to the restroom. Jay, me, I've had this happen in my career when I worked inside organizations. I did need to go to the restroom. Maybe I needed to get myself together before I yelled or before I cried, or just to talk myself down from whatever emotional ledge they had pushed me to.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Don't stick around. The second thing, just as important, I'm going to introduce a term from the J. Guilford dictionary. Do not ventertain. Ventertain. Do not vent as entertainment at work.
Yes.
Do not
like
vent.
Like gossiping all your grief to colleagues. Oh, it's a very it's
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. There, and what's interesting about this, I've introduced this to leadership teams and to teams of employees, and there's an argument back that says, I need to vent about this to others in order to solve the problem. I will tell you this. Nothing about, look, you can follow my hands too if we use this clip. Nothing about talking about the problem over there leads you to the solution, which is over here. When you talk smack about others, about something they've done, even if it's wrong, you're spreading the toxicity. You're damaging their reputation. You're damaging your own, because other people are saying, wow, if I make a mistake and I mistakenly say something nasty at Angie, she's going to tell everyone about it. You know?
Oh, you better. We all know. No, but it's like we're going to talk about it. No, but it disempowers you as well when you're out there, like in the workplace. I think it is good, like in that moment. So let's say you're having, like, you know, you're like, I'm sorry, I'm going to excuse myself. I've got to go and call a recruiter. No, but like, if you excuse yourself, maybe sometimes you need to speak to someone who knows a bit more about what's going on. So, like, I'll give you an example. Like, this was in the previous work. Great boss, one of the best boss I've ever had. But, like, one time he was under immense pressure, and I was, you know, again, his assistant, and he was pushing, but like he was under pressure, so he was trying to get me to do something that wasn't actually, you know, legal, and I was like, no. So basically, and he got really, like, angry for the first time in you know, in our work, since I worked there. He actually raised his voice at me and yelled and, like, starting to, like, you know, say things that he shouldn't be saying. And I was just like, first of all, I was gobsmacked. And I was just went, I remember I had my notebook, I'd stayed calm the whole time. And I was like, you know, when you can feel the beast rise up, And I
Yes.
was there and I was just
I've
like,
had that.
I closed my notebook and I went, I can't remember what I said, but the bit that I said after, I said something and then I said this, I said, um, I'm not going to carry on this conversation. I'm going to go for a walk and we're going to both calm down. I'm not leaving. I'm just going for a walk because I'm not carrying on this conversation. And I
Yes.
took my notebook and I had to walk past to the office, past the other
Mhm.
people, and there was some other assistants, and I was so dead quiet. They'd never seen me like that. I was like, poof, took my jacket and left. And he ran after me. It was like, no, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, I'm not leaving. Just going for a walk. And I could not just stay. Even if he said sorry there,
Mhm.
I was fuming. And I went for
Yes.
a walk and I made a call. I had a friend who was nearby who is in the financial services for many, many years. And he doesn't know, he doesn't know my boss on that. But I had to ask him a technical question. I was like, listen, I need to know, like, because I'm really, really upset. And he came to meet me and then he said, what is it? I was like, no, I'm fine. And he was like, no, tell me. And then I ended up saying, no, if this, and this happens, what, and he was like, oh yeah, no, definitely. It's a no. And then once I calmed down, I went back in and he apologized and he said, yeah, don't worry about it.
Yeah. I do think.
I don't know if I should add this, maybe I should go beep, beep, beep. But it's like, I think sometimes it's more like the fact that when people are under so much pressure, they misbehave,
Mhm.
right? So his behavior was
Yes.
bad. I wasn't having it because I have like really strong, like he knew he could rely on me to do everything compliant. That's part of why I was there because he knew he could, I was very trustworthy.
Mhm.
And so that's, sometimes life will send you tests because had I said, oh, okay, sure, yeah, there's no problem. My job was to make sure that whatever happened was okay. But he didn't know. And I kept telling him, we cannot do this. So
Yeah.
it's not because he was trying to get me to do anything illegal. He didn't realize that what he was asking me is not legal inside. So yeah, but and then he was like, oh yeah, really sorry, I wasn't aware, and then it was fine. But I think me walking out the room kind of put it down. I don't think he expected that because a
Yeah.
lot of people don't really walk away from them. Does that make sense? Like that's someone who was actually a good person, but again, someone who was, used to
Yeah.
be always the boss, 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 and he's not used to hearing no. I had to deal
Yeah.
with that too. But so I think that definitely like that shocked him that I walked out.
Yeah. I think
Um,
it's important to exit, do not stay. And I think it's also
mm,
important what you're pointing out is you might need to talk to someone else to take care of yourself emotionally or to get more information. That is quite different. Like you're talking to solve the immediate problem of your emotional distress, or you're talking to solve the immediate problem, like there is more information that I may not have. That's different from entertaining to say, oh, it has now become addictive and entertaining for me to keep retelling the story
mm.
that to people who can't solve the problem. So I think that is an important distinction that we're drawing. But yeah, don't do that. Definitely don't stay. Walk away if you can, and you can mostly almost always walk away.
Mm-hmm.
Surprisingly, like if you look around physically, no one's keeping you there.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, having done it myself, having coached others through it, having talked to leaders who've been walked away from, it's helpful and it's powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the alternative wasn't going to be good because if I stayed, I was going to match him. And that's what I
Yeah.
didn't want. I didn't want it. He was up here and I knew why. And I knew he
Mhm.
couldn't understand what I was trying to tell him. And he was
Yes.
getting really aggravated. And I was like, and all of a sudden he pushed the limit. There was something like, I was like, if I stay, I'm going to explode like him.
Uh-huh.
And I'm going to leave the job on the spot like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was just going to be
Yes.
catastrophic.
Yeah.
I was like,
I know
I need
this.
to walk out, phew, talk to someone, make sure like, I'm not confusing myself and came back in. But yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
unfortunately, because of the power imbalance,
yeah,
leaders unfortunately have a lot more leeway in terms of exploding emotionally because they get to decide what happens to you and you don't necessarily directly get to decide what happens to them. Like again, in a matrixed organization where there are lots of different levels, this leader can't directly say fire that person. That's not usual, at least in the US when you have lots of layers in HR. they can retaliate and make it uncomfortable for you in all these different ways.
Oh, but they can eventually decide that you're the one who goes if things needs to change.
Yeah, I mean, over the course of 4 write-ups, yes.
Yeah.
But I do, though, think having those adult conversations manages that, because if you let the leader know that this has impacted me in these ways, and I want to move forward in a healthy way, when you have that conversation, well, I can tell you a different story. I was in an organization, and the leader, the owner of the organization, brought me in because they wanted feedback. And this has happened a number of times. They're not getting the feedback, even when they do surveys, because internal surveys.
Oh, yeah, you don't
trust them. And so they bring me in, and I can get the feedback from the team members.
Yeah.
And part of what I worked with the VPs and C-level, and I did a workshop on non-retaliation, because guess what? Leaders aren't trained to know what retaliation is, and they aren't trained on how to avoid it. So oftentimes when a leader hears something they don't like, they respond with their emotions. Like I remember in this particular
Is that what you define by retaliation?
Well, it's responding in ways. No, retaliation is responding in ways in antagonism to something, a behavior that an employee has. It's like upward feedback to antagonize the employee or to actively make them feel uncomfortable. A lot of times, leaders are simply responding from their own emotions. So I remember one leader in this particular instance said, okay, these things are uncomfortable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to avoid this employee so that I don't interact with her in a negative way. Guess what the employee thought was happening?
Silent treatment, punishment?
Exactly. But what did the leader think was happening?
Oh, he was making life easier for her, not imposing himself on her.
Exactly. So it's all of this subtle stuff, and you just have to have that conversation.
So how do you resolve that? Because that sounds tricky. Because one feels ignored, the other one thinks that he's doing her a favor by ignoring her. I mean,
so for me, when I come in and I have no skin in the game. I mostly don't know either the organization or the leaders. That's why they hire me. I can come in and I do a certain level of assessment. It's proprietary to CoWorks, my organization. And then I can point out to the leaders, like sometimes I'm in like, don't send that email. Like I'm that granular. Don't say these things instead. And then with the employees, I can right size their expectations, because oftentimes, here we go. Oftentimes leaders that are powerful got to their positions of power through assertiveness or aggressiveness. When they get there, I explain to them, you don't need to do that anymore. And as I coach the leader towards different behaviors, I have to also help the employees to understand that there's going to be some residual for 3 to 6 months as this leader learns these new behaviors. So it's not going to change tomorrow.
Yeah.
If it is uncomfortable for you, or if it's harassment, which is illegal, we're going to resolve that as we move forward. There's a learning curve, and we all have to understand that mostly none of us are taught to manage our emotions at work. We just aren't. And so we all react in these ways.
And so sometimes I feel, so this is sometimes when I've looked back myself, I think sometimes as an employee, you don't realize actually that you are retaliating with certain behavior or different things. Like, do you have any, so like you just had a great example of how a boss was retaliating with basically silent treatment almost, so ignoring, but he didn't realize
but he wasn't trying to.
Yeah, no, he wasn't. He was trying to get out of her way. He was making her comfortable, he thought, right? Are there any other typical ways that, the other way around, like how employees retaliate that you've noticed in your work, like things that you've seen?
Yeah, I've seen one is usually if it's power, it's passive aggressiveness. So if the employee doesn't have power, they will become passive aggressive. They'll form coups or alliances and say, we're going to be silent in the next 3 meetings, or we're just going to agree to everything. Or, I remember horrible. One team member, him saying, I'm just going to say, fine. And so it became this very passive aggressive, fine, I'm okay, fine. And disengaging in the work is very common. Or setting up a power structure among themselves where they say, if all 3 of us just go silent or discontinue doing a certain thing. Yeah, so I've seen that with employees. And the way to move
Yeah.
forward, honestly, and this sounds so simple, is to unhide the ball. So, Angie, you and I have had a conflict at work, and you're my boss, or we're colleagues. Doesn't matter what. You know what? This thing happened yesterday. It's really uncomfortable for me, and it might be uncomfortable for you. But we have to work together. How do we move forward? And then, as a leader, you might want to say, I want to be sure that I'm giving you space without looking like I'm retaliating. So, what would work best for you? Or as an employee, to say, I want to work well with you. That was really uncomfortable. I know that people make mistakes at work. You did yell at me and it made me cry. We, how do we get past this? Because I want to work well with you. Because at the end of the day, do you want to work well with that employee, that leader, or that colleague, or do you want, what do you want? So
Yeah.
if you want that and you say that, it'll be like, oh, me too.
Yeah.
You feel the relief in that, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think, but there's also this part in my mind that's like, not everyone's going to be responsive. Some people really do not want to talk about it. Some people are just going to be, that may even make them feel even more uncomfortable. They're like, or they're going to deflect or be even more passive aggressive by going, I don't know what you're talking about. It's fine. Do you know what I mean? Like they'll go, and then I think that may be, I don't know if that's a point where you just have to go, okay, well, I'm just going to have to just sort of like cohabit with that situation, because the other person is not willing to unhide the ball and pick it up and play with me again, so it's like, so I think that sometimes there is like, personal limitation if the other person is not willing, but I think definitely, like, I've had an experience like this, and I'm not going to tell the whole story, it's a bit too long, but when I started a new job, and the person who was my senior, her and I was like, oh my God, it was just like, it was a nightmare. And people had bets in the company for how long I'd stay, because she had a bit of a reputation, which I didn't know about. But we were really clashing, and one time it really made me sick. Like, it made me sick. I remember one time I was home, visit my mom, and I was talking about it, and I went, and I had to, I became sick. I had to throw up. Like, that's how, like, physically sick it made me. And she said, I remember I came back out, and she was like, you need to talk to her on Monday. You can't carry on like this. Like, just have a conversation with her, and just prepare and just sit down and have bullet points and stuff. And so I did that on a Monday. I did, and guess what? We became like best friends at work.
Yeah.
We're still in touch now. I used to call her my work auntie. And, she was like, we were really close. And everyone was shocked. And it was then I found out that people had lost money betting that I was going to go. And, and everyone was so shocked, because we sat down, had a conversation. And I remember all I did was, like, I said, do you mind if we take 10 minutes, a bit later, and we just have a chat, you and I? And she was like, sure, no problem. And so we did, and I didn't say everything that was on my mind, obviously, because you know what they say, you could just go on for hours when you're upset, like, and have a PowerPoint slides, And so it's just, and then I heard her. She had reasons to be upset with me too. And when I heard her,
you weren't completely innocent, Angie.
No, apparently not. No, but when I heard her, and I remember saying to her, right, okay, yeah, I didn't realize that's what I was doing. I understand why, like, that definitely came across, rude and this and that, and I'm sorry, it's not my intention. And you know what? We both heard each other, and we were like this, like strong, strong-headed, and we had to sit down, and all of a sudden it was like everything evaporated. But that's because she was willing to. Had she been, no, I don't want to talk to you. You're new here. Why would I want to waste my time? She could have done that, and I would have been like. But I remember, as I said, like, I would definitely wanted to speak with her, because I was like, I like this job, but I don't want to leave. So I have to resolve this. Yeah. But had I not liked the job, I probably have gone off.
Well, I think one thing that can make your readers your listeners, I should say, feel comfortable with having this type of conversation is to understand that biologically we are wired to not like conflict. So that's why when it happens, we still have that sticky feeling, like, for days, because we want it to be resolved. So biologically, most people want the resolution, because it feels it's meant to feel uncomfortable. So I think that's really important to understand that when you approach that person, chances are they want this to be over too. They don't want to walk past you and not talk to you because it's actually too much work. It's easier just to have a pattern. I say hello to everyone. I say hello to everyone. And then instead of remember, I can't talk to Angie. But the other part I think is to understand your style, because like what I've seen is one person's assertive boss is one person's very direct and clearly communicating boss. One person's boss who is micromanaging is another person's boss who's very supportive and in there and helping me out. So we use a lot of data. We use predictive index, ambassador profile. We use data to help people understand their styles, because it could simply be a mix of oil and water. Because I speak a lot at Cirque, because I'll give you a really good example. I worked across 7 shows in Las Vegas. And on the shows, because they have people 30 feet in the air, they are very direct. They're like, that's not going to work. Scratch that. No, do that. Change that. That's wrong. Jay, you got to go back with that. You don't have enough information. When I first started working on the shows, it felt rude, but it was what you needed to do for the show, because that's the way they communicated. They needed things up to the second. Whereas when in the office, it was the in between mix. But when I was client facing, it was very long conversations about their vacation and this, and then we'd eventually get to the contract. So you understanding your style and what works best for you, and not demonizing the person who might just have a different style. Like they might just be very assertive, and you might want a more leisurely, passive communication style. So I think it's not necessarily a judgment that one person is wrong, another is right. Yeah. Oftentimes it's just a mix of different styles. And I would say, even if you don't use a predictive index or ambassador profile, you can go and do a free online assessment, like 16 personalities, and just understand who you are. And then you can see like, this other style doesn't work for me. So it's helpful to have data. Yeah.
But that's really good. I wish I'd heard you say that years and years ago, because I think, because one is, there is like understanding your style, understanding other people's style, and I guess like reading the room. But there's also not, maybe we don't have to change oneself to always mold. I mean, I don't know, actually, I'm just assuming here what you say. I guess my question, first, let me ask this question, sorry, is that, so let's say one is like really assertive, and the other one is like, let's talk about holidays before we talk about the contract, that kind of vibe. Can those mix and match, or should one sort of like mold to the other? Like how, are there just sometimes stuff that are not compatible, or just can people just, cohabit, or do they have to change to cohabit?
Well, I think if you're talking about work, and this is where the larger Jay, the consultant, comes in, it all needs to work towards the business goal. So I use Uber as a great example. Uber, one of their core values wasn't be honest all the time. One of their core values was always be hustling. One of their core values was super pumped, because they needed to hire people. Yeah, but think about it. They needed to hire people who would infiltrate cities and states and countries and break laws, and be willing to be on the hook for legal to pay 10, 20, 30 million dollars so that they can infiltrate and create Uber in that city. Honesty is not necessarily the core value you want to go for. And if you need to think about if your personality works towards the business goal, because you can be in like at Cirque on the shows. For my team, like I hired an event planner who worked across 3 shows, because you can't be necessarily quote unquote polite in terms of when you're talking to heads of a department, direct and immediate, and respond immediately when they want to know how many minutes does it take for 37 people. Literally, they want to know how many minutes does it take for 37 people to walk from the bus to the lobby. They want to know that to the exact minute, and you better get that information promptly. And so I think it's the existing larger answer is, if you are in the organization and these personalities will help the organization succeed, or these styles of communication, and they're not necessarily harassment, they're just maybe direct or assertive or whatever style, or passive.
Yeah.
and you don't have that style, then maybe your style doesn't fit with the organization.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe you can change and become a part of that style. So it's a larger question. I don't think there's a
Yeah.
right. People want to say there's a right or wrong. It's for Uber, super pumped and always be hustling. They said be an owner, not a renter. Those are very specific things, and it
Yeah.
helped them succeed.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
reason, yeah. So you see what I'm saying? It's really about
Mm.
what the business needs in order to
Yeah.
succeed. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it does make sense. I think it's yeah, well, I think it's sort of like really boils down to, really knowing who you are as a person and how much you want to
Yes.
live in integrity and how
Hmm.
much, which parts are you happy to compromise, right? And I
Yeah.
think, like, I think I've definitely made the error in, if I was to look back to, because I used to always, I've gotten this, I never had this feedback because I grew up in Belgium, but I
Hmm.
never had this feedback when I was in Belgium. Belgium, we're very direct. It's super rude when you in the UK. We when I go to Belgium, I can see how it comes, how I came across so rude or abrupt and
Okay.
stuff. But it's just our
Yes.
style, you know what I mean? It's just
Hmm.
very direct. And even now, when I speak to my best friend from Belgium, sometimes I'm like, woof, that was a bit, you know what I mean? Because I've lost the edge, right? So,
Uh-huh.
but I think for years and years and years, living in different countries and stuff, and the feedback was like, "Oh, that's you quite. Oh, that's abrupt. Oh, that's dry. That's." But what they mean is like, but it wasn't meant in like, "Wow, you're so direct and you're
Uh-huh.
a straight
Hmm.
shooter." And I think I almost thought, "Oh, something's wrong with me. Something's wrong with me," and I sort of had, and I softened up a lot. But it wasn't. It really wasn't. It didn't help me because it wasn't coming from a place of like, natural evolution, if you know what I mean. Like,
I
maybe
see.
getting older and I'm getting soft or whatever. It came from a place of, oh, I don't want to be upsetting people all the time. And so, but I think, yeah, I think it's like, so I think that's why, like, you raised some good points about, either it's a match or actually you can learn from. So it depends
Mhm.
what it is, right? It depends. It's a very, it's a bigger question.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
what's interesting when I know one of the questions we talked about earlier was like, how do you decide, how do you suss out if a boss is going to be difficult or not? It's
Yeah.
really what's going to be difficult for you. Is directness going to be difficult for you, or is indirectness going to be difficult for you? Is a person who spends the first 7 minutes of a meeting talking about golf or baseball going to be
Yeah, I can't.
difficult
I
or
can't
not?
handle that. I can't. I hate that. I hate that. I hate
See.
that. I don't like having to read subtext because I always feel like I always want to have a decoder with people. Sometimes I'm like,
Uh-huh.
because it's hard. Like, even therapists said. Like, I remember I said that to a therapist once. I was like, I feel like I have an issue because I wish I had like a decoder. Like, I just go like, did the person mean what they say, or they were supposed to read subtext? Like, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Sometimes you're like,
Mhm.
what is it? And she's like, yeah, yeah. If I had that, I wouldn't have. If people had that, I wouldn't have a job anymore. Even
Yes.
therapy,
Yeah.
sometimes we don't. We have to
Mhm.
find out little by little. But
Mhm.
yeah, what was I
But you
saying
were
that
saying, yeah,
for?
you're different people's
Oh, red
styles.
flag.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The whole thing of like it takes forever to say something because I don't want to become that either. And I think we
Yeah.
become our environment.
Hmm.
That's part of that's been now how I like to sort of discern.
Hmm.
If, when I for where I work and things like that is like because you eventually somehow emulate behavior. Like you want to
Yeah.
look up to people. You want to be like I want to learn from you. But if all of a sudden you realize that behavior is something that doesn't sit right for you, for your values, like passive
Yeah.
aggressive, some
Yeah.
people think it's a great quality. I've been in
Yes.
workplaces where that was applauded, and for me, I'm like, I am disgusted. I cannot,
Uh-huh.
that's just
Yeah.
not. But then I realized, whoa, actually, I was doing passive aggressive things too,
Hmm.
just because I
Yeah.
didn't know how to deal with the conflict because the environment, that was how you
Yeah.
survived in there. So it's not, you have to find those things out. Is there anything else sort of that you would like to share with us that maybe you didn't get a chance to share, with what we were talking about, whether it is from the boss or the employee, um,
Yeah, I think
red
we've spent a
flags
lot of
and
times. I think Angie, what's good for us is that we spend a lot of time empowering people who are employees. Again, this is not to blame an employee. These are things that you can do, master keys that you can use to empower yourself if you're in a situation where there's politics, especially from the top down. I also want to say to leaders out there, you gotta treat soft skills with the same reverence as you treat technical skills, because it is the soft skills that can damage your people and your profit. What we've seen with a lot of the headlines is that leaders are making poor soft skills decisions, and they're damaging people, and partnerships are pulling out, endorsement deals are being lost because they're making poor decisions. Even a decision, again, at the like Luck and Coffee, to lie about their profit, it was technically sound to know how to forge those types of documents. That's not a technical skill gap, it's a soft skills skill gap. So I think understanding that when you have leaders who make poor decisions because they lack soft skills training, you are going to, first of all, damage your people, damage your culture, but you may not care about that. You're going to lose your top talent. They're going to go work for your competition. And over the course of 12 to 18 months, you're going to see that impact on your bottom line. And then it can be more immediate. Like I say, one tweet away from disgrace. One leader can do something horrible and it can be tweeted about. We saw what happened with Ellen DeGeneres, lost lots of viewers. So
I noticed there was a lot of people saying, like, the people who came out said they didn't like her. Is that what it was?
Well, the show was accused of bullying and a toxic work environment, and
I
then
think I heard about
one
that.
person tweeted about it, and literally it just blew up. And then some people say the show was canceled because of that. She ended this. I think it's her last season, but they lost a lot of viewership. So it's really important now with the advent of social media, where you are, whether you want to or not, is transparent. If one of your leaders happens to do something wrong and they're videoed and it's posted, then you're done. So even just for the sake of protecting the company and your profit, you really want to get these soft skills in the hands of your leaders.
Yeah, and of course, like, it's not like, we shouldn't be walking around being worried about, being Me Too and cancelled and whatnot, like but it is like it's just a world that we live in, definitely. But I think it should, hopefully we sort of like resolve that from a place of like you said, like self-awareness and accountability. I think those are really the two words I feel like I take away from this conversation with you today. It's like being aware, or at least being aware that you're not aware of yourself all the time. And so feedback, critique, is not something you need. Once you get it, how do you handle it? Like you're saying, that example about the boss who just ignored that person. They thought they were doing right by them, but effectively it was making it worse. So it's like, so knowing how to handle it, how to engage after you've quote unquote resolved that conflict. But if you're not engaging right, you're not resolving anything anymore.
Just ask. Ask, like, how should we do this moving? We don't have to hide the ball. Just ask. Like, I tell leaders, in some of my work I do, this is for people who might hire me later, this is a spoiler alert, but one exercise is I tell leaders, get feedback from your team members, and then I walk them through, okay, are any of these things going to change your personality or your lifestyle? No. Make all the changes they've suggested. And then let's see over 3 months how much better your team performs. Just ask your team members what you can do better and then do it. That's it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it's obviously, it's all like easier said than done. Like, we know, like you said, like, conflict, we all feel so uncomfortable with that. But I think, like, listening to you, I feel like maybe, because I had this, what do you call it? Is it niggling or nagging question in my mind?
Nagging.
Nagging question in my mind, where I was like, how, because I was thinking of that job, that mentioning about how I lost it when I told the person that we're crossing some lines and it's not okay with me, and I remember thinking, like, why? Because that person was so emotional, like, they'd go from 0 to 100 so quickly, and like with everyone, it wasn't just like, with me, but it's just like, and I thought, and I've seen that before when other people who, another person who's quite successful, like financially and whatnot. And I was wondering, how can people who are this successful made, obviously I haven't checked the bank account, but I'm just saying, like, they have definitely access to funds and stuff, and they're very successful and they're known, and I'm like, how can people who are this emotionally immature, how can they become so successful? And I wonder if maybe the answer, from what I heard from our conversation with this because people have just enabled them. I don't know, but you think you need emotional, because you know how you look at all these like motivational videos here, you have to like be self-aware to attract, wealth and whatnot. I don't
Yeah.
know, and you're like, well, I'm seeing people behaving really bad, and they're doing real fine. So I don't know, like what is it? Like, have you noticed that like sometimes it really highly immature people?
I think they have types of intelligence. So I think that the
Mm.
person who may not have people skills may have a technical skill or a business savvy. I've seen
Yeah.
very charismatic leaders who can walk into a room and get things, but the very charisma that is your strength also allows them to read people and push their buttons. So it's like, I'm charismatic, so I know how to get everyone on board, but I also am very charismatic, so I can read and know exactly how to push your buttons if you get in my way. So I think we have to separate the financial success and the business success from being successful as a leader.
Yeah.
A lot of people get on board with leaders who are successful because they want the financial success, and they excuse, like you said, they excuse their behaviors, and they're like, oh, John's an a-hole, but he's riding the rocket ship to success. So a lot of people have been riding with this person for, you've seen it with stars, like these stars have all of these addictions, and all of their croonies just allow it to happen because she's going to get up there and sing another hit, and she can keep paying me my $380,000 a year. So it is, I like to say, and this is probably a good thought to end on, it takes a village to raise an asshole.
It does. No, absolutely. It's all the enabling. I agree with you. But it's like really what you said, and I said it badly, and thank you for like, recapping this so nicely now. It really is, because it's that thing about soft skill, hard skill, we're not putting, you can have it, you can be really good at making money and bringing the money in, but it doesn't mean that you're good at the people side. So, Jay, I want to ask you the two final questions I ask all of my guests. I call them the finishing thoughts.
Uh-oh, here we go.
So the first one is, what do you wish you'd realized at 18, but really understood on a cellular level? Not just like, oh, I know this in my mind, but like really understood at 18.
I'm gonna make this short, but it's a roundabout way of doing it. There is a show, I would watch a lot of superhero shows, and there is always the moment where the superhero had the power, and the watcher, the audience would be like, you have the power, but they just didn't fully believe in themselves, so they couldn't step into it.
Yeah.
And that's something I wish I knew at 18. Like, and I know now, like, everyone has an immense amount of personal power, and all it takes is to know it and to step into it. And sometimes it's blind. Like for me, I left Cirque 4 years ago. And that was when I was kind of, I've done some really good things, and Cirque was still very shiny. And I left because I needed to step into a different form of power. But sometimes it's blind. So what I would tell others that I didn't realize is that we're all hugely powerful, and we can determine our own futures. We just have to step into it. Put on the super cape, and you just jump and you will fly.
Yeah, I think that's definitely key, because I think a lot of is, I think, sometimes we can feel like we sit on this gold mine, and that not necessarily mean like actual finance, but this gold mine, but we just like we just don't know where we put the key, and it's like, feel like we feel like it's like, you feel like you disempower yourself, and like I just know I've got this potential, but where the fuck is the key? Like, and that kid is that confidence. It's like, oh, not even confidence, it's just like just taking the action, and instead what we watch Netflix, or we just hang out with the wrong people, or whatever it is, like we just stop ourselves at self-sabotage. But yeah, no, I love that. I think definitely is that we just have to like step into it. And so the second one is, what stuff do you not put up with anymore?
For me, I want to say what I don't put up with, because that's one thing, but I only keep people in my circle who are positive and forward thinking. I have a little time to spend on talking about problems that aren't happening to most people in the world. So things I care about, I move forward and solve. Like, so if I care about animal rights, or if I care about recycling, instead of talking about how people don't recycle, I'm just going to go and recycle. If I'm going to donate the money to the place that's going to do the thing that's going to help. So I no longer talk about, again, look towards the problem. I move towards the solution. And I keep people in my circle who do those types of things. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I love that. So Jay, can you please tell us like where can we find you? How do you want people to contact you? How can people work with you? Do you also work remotely? If someone listens to you somewhere else in the world and they want to know how to work with you, give us all the good
Yeah,
stuff.
right now I'm primarily focusing on fireside chats because and I go to organizations and talk with leaders or teams, and I can give a lot of really powerful ideas in an hour. So that's something that I'm interested in hosting. I also have a workshop where we talk about creativity and innovation, and that's better handled in person. I fly all around the world, so I can go anywhere. It's 4 to 6 hours. And I talk about my time at Cirque. I use some of those examples, and they're interactive activities where you actually learn to tap into your creative powers in real time. And I can bring some folks from Broadway and from Stomp and from Cirque as
Nice.
panelists.
Oh, Stomp is great. I've seen Stomp
Yeah,
as
so
well.
I have a host of like crazy folks that I can employ to do this type of stuff. So if you want to know anything about that, you reach out to me at jay@coworkslead.com. JAY@COWORKSLEAD.com, or just text me at 646-386-6558. I don't mind putting my number out there, 646-386-6558. Right now, mostly I'm focusing on fireside chats, the creativity workshop, and any leadership training. Those are the 3 things that we handle now.
Do you mind just like quickly explain like fireside chats? Like I think I understand what you mean, but I don't know if that's maybe like an American expression. Like what does that mean?
It may be. It's usually a conversation. It's called fireside because in theory it's like everyone's sitting around a fire of some sort, and you're in a chair, and someone from the organization is in a chair, and they're asking you questions that are important to the organization. And 1,000 or a couple of thousand people are listening. Or sometimes it's very intimate. It could be like 50 top leaders. So it's a conversation from a thought expert, such as myself, something about leadership and profit. And they're asking very important questions that the entire organization needs to think about. It's not a keynote because a keynote is kind of like, I have these 4 ideas and I just say them everywhere. A fireside chat is more, we're in this moment in our organization. This is what we're thinking about. Jay Guilford, from your experience working across Fortune 100 companies, answer this for us, answer this for us, answer this for us. And the last thing I'll say about fireside chats, not to really plug me, but to plug them generally, but me also, is that you can, when we do those, you get answers to the questions that immediately apply to you and your leaders, because if they're C-level or VP, maybe they don't want to ask DEI questions in front of the entire org. It gives a safe space for them to work out that stuff, and they can get that hard, direct advice they don't usually get. And it's just safe because it's like, I'm not saying this in front of my direct reports. I'm not sitting in a training next to someone who I've had this issue with. So, but yeah, that's a fireside. Anyone you want to know more about it, reach out to me.
Yeah, definitely reach out to you. This has been so wonderful. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time, and you've got like such a wonderful energy. And I've mentioned this too before when I reached out to you. I said, I really love your candor. Candor, I don't know how to pronounce it. How do you say it?
That's it. I'll take that. Yeah.
Candor, yeah. And you've got some great experience that you can share with us. And I think that's just been wonderful. So thank you so much, Jay. Really, thank you.
This has been a lot of fun, Angie. Thanks for inviting me.
And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, share it, subscribe it on iTunes, follow it on Spotify, or whichever platform you listen from. However you show love is how you can support this show. Drop me your questions or suggestions for future episodes via the website at angie-s.com, or come and find me on Instagram at Tool for This Shit Podcast. See you next week, and until then,
Using health inappropriately.